The way we do modern agile software development is changing. It makes me really happy to see the teams enhancing their traditional agile rituals like stand-up comedy meeting, backlog grooming, or planning poker with the practices based on a scientific method, where we actually come up with some hypotheses and then we run experiments. Contemporaries call it a lean startup. And the backbone of the lean startup approach are the technical practices and methods of continuous delivery. And many people ask, oh, is it really worth to try continuous delivery? Well, let's look at the numbers. In my opinion, not everything can be measured, and very often when we can measure things, we measure the wrong thing, like some local metrics that can be easily gamed, like, I don't know, code coverage. What I like to measure are the global metrics, for example, the number of deployments. So when we moved from the old world, from the one big monolithic system, well, in the old world, we were deploying 2 times a week. In the new world, we were deploying 6 times a day last year. Another thing that we measure is the lead time. How long does it take to take the code from the version control system after you commit the code to the version control system to the moment this thing is running in production and potentially making money? And for us, in this new microservice world, it's 5 to 8 minutes for each of the microservices. And it has really, really nice implications. Some time ago, there were people from another newspaper visiting us here at STP, and they were asking me, okay, what do you guys use as a layout tool for the articles? And I'm saying, oh, I'm using IntelliJ, my IDE. And it turns out that when you can deploy stuff to production in like 5 to 8 minutes, you don't need to build this special tooling because, you know, the deployment takes only 5 to 8 minutes. The best code is the one that you don't have to write. Okay, but here's the thing. Continuous delivery is not something you get for free. The first thing you need to do to make it easy to continuously deliver your software is to architect and design your software for continuous deliverability. And if you've never heard that word, it's probably because I've just made it up. There is this website called 12-Factor App, and this is a manifesto, 12 rules how to make apps that are easy to deploy and to run, especially in the cloud. And some of the rules are kind of obvious. You may disagree with some of them. For us, they just work. So I want to tell you how we actually approach 12-Factor App manifesto and what we've learned from it. So the first thing is that very often I see teams that put things like dev properties and test properties and prod properties into their code base. And what does 12-Factor App has to say about it? Well, it tells you, let's move this stuff outside and let's treat your code like an open source library and move all the environment variables somewhere else. So if you're running on Heroku as we do, well, you put all those environment-specific things into environment variables. The second lesson from the 12-Factor App Manifesto, I've been doing Java web development for quite some time, and I've been doing it mostly in Java space in the past. And it feels like the Java world is obsessed about in-memory HTTP session. When I was learning how to do web development in the beginning, all the books were rambling about, oh, use HTTP session. Actually, some people even built the frameworks that were actually fighting the stateless nature of the web, and they were pretending that it's something that it's not. But here's the thing. Statelessness is a feature. It's not a bug. It's not something you should fight. You should embrace the way the web works. And it turns out that when you run your application as stateless processes, well, things like zero downtime deployments become really, really easy. Sticky sessions are not needed. So here is what most enterprise class systems look like. They're very, very complicated. And some of the reasons for that is that they do more than their core business logic. So very often people try to implement something like cron inside their code base. If you have some kind of schedulers in your code base, people try to put something like version control system into their systems. It's another common problem I'm seeing in different code bases. And finally, we make logging more complicated than it needs to be. And when I was like a junior Java developer, I was always struggling with configuration of the different logging frameworks. So after like hours of struggling, each of my production boxes was finally writing to some log file. And then I was doing like SSH to each of those boxes, and I was tailing the log files. And then I was repeating it for the second box, for the third box. At this point, my keyboard should give me some feedback. It should give me like an electric shock, but it didn't, so I continued. And now, boom, one of the boxes explodes. And I don't have the logs where I need them the most. What does 12-factor app approach has to say about it? Well, it tells you, well, log to standard output and just pipe your logs to one of the modern log analysis tools. So if you want to host something yourself, you can try the Elk stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And if you want to outsource log processing to the cloud, you can try things like log entries that we've been using for some time. Scott Berkun said one time that installing software is like a first date. If it can't be polite, smart, and generous, what can you expect later? Well, how does it relate to how I approach 12-factor app? Well, I think that when you build those systems, it should be super easy to get up and running on your first day. So this is how I actually assess the quality of the code base that I'm going to work with. On the first day, I try to do those two things. I try to check out the code, then I try to build it in one command, and then I look for the command that can run the entire thing end-to-end in another command. And if you can do those things in two commands, you're doing really well. And you get extra points if you can actually start your app in under 100 milliseconds, because anything above 100 milliseconds, well, disrupts my flow, if you will.